classes, we are keep on talking about the specifically we discussed about ecology, then we discussed about the man and environment relationship, we discussed about cultural ecology and cultural relationship. We are keep on discussing about the how religion also matters in the context of resource, specifically on environmental management. Then we are discussing about the various basic concepts of ecology, then ecosystem, environment, ecological needs, habitat and all. So now we'll get into this, the very important aspect, that is called resource management. Because resource management is a very pioneer area in the environmental management. And you see, every society, every human beings, every organism needs some resource to survive. Because unless and until we need on having some kind of resource with us, it is very difficult in the part of us to survive. And what is that resource? See, if somebody asks you what is resource, anybody? What is resource?
Sir, hello sir.
Ah.
Sir, a resource is a source from which we can get benefit and from which we some gets some utility, like natural resources, human resources.
Any other resources? Anybody else?
Sir, resource is a kind of input, or we can say in the economic point of view is a factor of production which
Okay.
leads to an output of
See,
some benefit.
mostly whenever we are telling about the resource is nothing but a source of livelihoods. Right? It is source of livelihoods. Whether it is economic resource, whether it is natural resource, whether it is human resource, does not matter, but it is source of livelihood. Suppose if I have a knowledge, if I am a doctor, wherever I can sit, I can earn. So that knowledge, which is my human resource, helps me to earn and survive. Right? Because that knowledge as a doctor is my resource of, suppose I am an engineer, so I can also work. Suppose you are very good in your field of development studies, and wherever you can see it, you can work as an consultant and survive. So that's why that there are different and economic resources there. Suppose somebody is having land, somebody is having job, right? Somebody is having some house property, he has given rent and surviving. So that kind of source of livelihoods for people. Suppose if you look at the tribal people who mostly depends on forest resources for their survival, is considered as natural resources. So means the resources which is mostly whenever a source of livelihoods for everybody. So that means when any change in that source of livelihoods, it affects the organism. So that's why we always try to how we can provide an opportunity, how we can expand this source of livelihoods for everybody. Because now you see, whenever we are telling that instead of whenever we join in any professional education in any university or any institute, mostly from the very beginning we thought of getting a job. But if you look into the today's market, mostly what is happening, we are thinking about no, instead of doing a job, why should not we will try to be an entrepreneur so that we can create a job for others. So that means we can widen the scope for source of livelihood for others. That should be our main thrust. And how we can generate the employment opportunity for others. So resource, when we are telling, it might be your material resource, it may be the monetary, it may be service, it may be staff. Because suppose you see, I want to run an institute. If I don't see, suppose you see, most of the time people are applying for a different certificate and all now online, and if people are keep on writing, sir, we have not received our certificate and all. So what is happening? We have very shortage of staffs. The person who is dealing with the certificate and all also dealing with lots of activities. So it is also very problematic for us to one person handling all these issues. So that's what is exactly happened. So whatever it may be, in the entire process, we always try to get the kind of certain kind of uh, source for the survival. And whenever we are telling economic resources, I've already told you, mostly we are thinking about the services, some other aspects, goods, services, which we earn from here and there. So like that, whenever we are telling natural resources, mostly natural resources is nothing but which we mostly get from the environment. Specifically, if you look into, whenever we are speaking about the resources, then there are two things comes within our mind. One is natural resources, another is man-made resources. The resource which is generated from the environment, which is generated from the nature, is called as a natural resources. And the resources which we get from the which the is made by the human being by further processing and all, that is called human resource, sorry, man-made resources. Means if you look into the broader sense, the resource one is man-made resource, another is natural resources. But anyhow, here we are not going to speak of this man-made resources, rather we are going to speak on the natural resources. Because whenever we are telling our topic, our title of this course is Ecology and Sustainable Development, and whenever we are telling about the ecology and all, we have to look into the natural resources and how this natural resources plays a pivotal role in human life. And forget about now others, at least we can think about the human life. And also when we'll just talk about the human life, we have to talk about that how it is linked to the life of others also. And have you ever heard the different terminology in natural resource? See, have you seen any natural resources? Can you just give me some example of natural resources? Anybody?
Sun, tree, forest, oil, mineral,
Okay. Anything else?
water, air,
Anybody?
Coal.
Okay. So you see, in that again the question will come renewable, non-renewable again. Okay, because whenever we are speaking about natural resources, some are renewable and some are non-renewable. Because whenever we are telling about natural resources, from resource we usually jump to the energy. Okay, renewable energy, non-renewable energy also comes from this. So that's why always what is, because we are our topic is itself sustainable. So we are always looking about sustainable management. We should think about this how to sustain the community, how to sustain the society, how to you see, whenever we are telling the sustaining the community when or the sustaining the society, the main intention is how we can maintain an ecological balance, because unless and until we maintain an ecological balance in the society, it will be very difficult in our part to sustain the society. Okay, because you see, when you are in the school, you might have heard that how to we have to establish an ecological balance in the society, because this is a very prominent. Because if you look into that, suppose you take an example. So if we'll all will kill, will use the fertilizer and pesticide and all kill the earthworms, then obviously the we are forgetting the importance of earthworms. And if we'll kill all the earthworms, then the soil fertility will decrease. Okay. And also it will also hamper the other animals. Suppose if you kill all the snakes, then what will happen? The quantity of frog will increase, the quantity of rat will increase. Again, what will happen? The moment the frogs and rat will increase, they will again create the problem for us. So that's why we always want to maintain a balance in the environment, we always want to maintain a balance in the society. Through that, what will happen? That the society will continue in a sustainable way. Through that, there will be environmental balance will be managed, and the people and all the, not only the human beings, all the living organisms will have a good life in the society. So that's why, in order to maintain a good life for all the living organisms in the society, we should always try to how to manage the resources, manage the environment in a proper way. Because, and also every time we always think about sustainable development, that while I will consume, I have to consume from. See, just look into, we have, the human beings should learn so many things from other creatures and animals and all. Do you know who is the most emotional? Do you think that only man is an emotional animal, or the other animals are also emotional? Hmm?
Other animals.
Others are emotional.
Okay, so are they rational or not? Or only human being is rational? Hmm? Only
So
human beings
only
only human beings rational, fine. So, but you see, if you look at the emotion, you see, if you look at the emotional behavior of other animals, specifically if you look into the cows are, even sometimes I feel today human being is not emotional, rather cows are more emotional. If you look into the, because there are lots of research study came from various countries throughout the globe, and they found that cows are more emotional, and mostly the Western society, not an Indian study, mostly the Western society have revealed that, because when a cow gave birth, how she becomes more affectionate to the calf. And if you might have, I don't know whether you have observed or not, even if the owner dies, the cows also cries. And you'll, if you look at the, observe minutely the activities of a cow, you'll find that if the owner dies, for few days, the cows behaves differently, because cow always feel the absence of the owner also. And if, even if you'll see that, generally you see, suppose who, the person who milk a cow, if he is absent, the others usually face very difficulties to milk that cow, because she is having an emotional attachment to the person who always feed her. She will not allow somebody else to milk her. So she will not allow somebody to just go to her also sometimes. So behavior immediately change, because she is having an emotional attachment with X. She always look for the X to be the always with him, with her. So what I'm telling here, that when you observe a bird, suppose you put some rice, the bird is eating those rice, and after eating, what she used to do? She used to carry some rice for their kids. Right? So which reflect that they are also very much sustainable in nature. They are also thinking about their future generation. They are also thinking about their kids. Okay. So what exactly is happening? The human being is becoming very redundant, and human being is becoming very much kind of selfish, greedy in the attitude, nature, and individualistic approach is being developed. So for which the sustainability in this environment is being a very question mark. When any development project comes to any area, it brings with lots of destruction to the local environment. But during the time, the human being always think about his own survival, how much more compensation can be given to him, how much employment opportunity can be given to him. And he always calculated that what kind of loss will come to him, specifically from the economic ground. Rather, he forgets about that what kind of environmental loss will happen to him. We always calculate everything from economic perspective rather than calculating the things from the social and environmental perspective. And we never thought, if a development project will come here, what kind of loss will come to other animals, other creatures, other insects who are living in this forest, living in this local ecosystem for since centuries. We never thought about them, because we are very self-centered. We always think about ourselves, rather we never thought of others. This is a major problem which is happening in the case of each and every individual in the South. And specifically, and no, anyhow, and there are certain kind of community who are always thinking about the environment, but still I'm telling the majority is thinking in the same sense. So now the major challenge in front of us is that how to manage these resources. What exactly we have to do for the betterment of this people, betterment of this environment, betterment of this for everybody. This is a very challenging aspect for all of us. See, so anyhow, whenever we discuss about all these things, so now some of you gave some example of different resources. So some people told the coal, some people told forest, some people told water. Hey, suppose you see, again there is a lots of categorization. Suppose a river is flowing, whether river is a open, what kind of resource? It is a natural resource, no doubt, but within the natural resource, what kind of resource it is? See, there is a some resources called private resource, some resources called common property resource or common pool resource, some resources called open access resource. So a river is what kind of resource? Anybody? A river is a what kind of resource?
Open access.
Okay. Anybody else? A forest? A forest is what kind of resource? Sorry? Chaitanya is speaking something? What kind of
Sir,
resource?
river is an open source. We do have river boards which act controls states like the boundary, and one should not use river water. Even there are restrictions.
Now, it is what kind of resource? River, forest, what kind of resource? Deepa was telling something. What kind of resource it is?
Sir, public resources.
Public resource. Okay. So anybody else? Alok? Okay. You see, I'll just give a small example, then you can understand. See, when I was a student, I just completed my 10th exam. Then I moved to my uncle's house. That time they were staying in the Bodbil. So I just went there and I found there huge forests are there in the Keonjhar districts of Odisha. Lots of mangoes are ripening, and I was very good in climbing the tree. When I was a kid, I was very smart in climbing all the trees. So then whenever I saw huge mangoes are there, then I called my uncle's daughter. She was very small, 4 5 years during that time. Uncle went to the school, then we both rushed to the forest, and I immediately climbed the tree and picking up lots of mangoes, just throwing the mangoes on the ground and see, keeping it, storing everything in a bag. Then all of a sudden, a tribal person came and started scolding to me and with a stick and told, "Come down, I'll beat you." So then when I saw on the ground, my uncle's daughter is left, vanished. She left, just 5 years, she vanished. I'm an outsider. But anyhow, like you people, I was thinking that forest is government land, anybody is having right over that. So I was not bothering, I was not coming down, rather I was picking up mangoes and throwing to the ground. Then when I come down, that he was having a huge verbal fighting with each other, with me. Then, but he didn't allow me to take the mangoes. Then I returned an empty hand to home. Then all of a sudden he passed the information to my uncle, and my uncle scolded me. And my uncle told me it is his land. Why you went his land and picked up mangoes? But since that days, I got an unanswered to my question that how come the land which is belongs to the government, which is very widely spreading here and there, how come the forest land is belongs to a particular human, a particular person? And I thought that okay, might be my uncle is an outsider staying here, never wants to get into any conflict for which he supported the tribal. But when I get into this very formal education of this anthropology and sociology and started working on this forest resource and all, because when I started my research, specifically my research was mostly on agriculture, then water management, tribal development, but immediately my professional education, professional service started with forest management. After my completion of PhD, then I get into the professional sector and I mostly started working on forest management. And I had strong experience of working on forest sectors, and then I tried to understand whose resource it is. Then I only understood that no doubt what for this tribal fellow scolded me is absolutely right, because land is belongs to him, not belongs to somebody else. But in what way? In what way the land is belongs to him? Because all of you know that by statute of Indian Constitution, land is belongs to whom? Land is belongs to? Hmm? Do you know that very interesting things in our law? Land is belongs to whom?
The
Anybody?
tribal people.
I'm not only telling you about the tribal, even non-tribals also area. Land is belongs to whom?
For everyone, people.
Sorry? Ananya, you are not audible. Your video, when I say audio is...
For everyone,
Land is belongs to everyone, okay? Anybody else? Others are not speaking anything. Sachin?
To the government probably.
Okay, government. Who is that government? Who is that government? Because we are having federal state.
We are
government. Federal state, no? Who is the owner? I gave
Yes,
lots
sir,
of...
federal state.
No, you have to be very clear who. See,
People.
people, okay, then Sajav is not telling anything nowadays. Sajav is here or left somewhere?
No, sir, I'm here.
Okay, so what I'm telling, see, the very interesting thing in Indian Constitution is land is belongs to state and resources belongs to center. See, the land is belongs to state government and the trees are belongs to the center. Very interesting. Your land is so very well. In your land, somebody else is planting the trees. Suppose if I look into any, just whenever you will come to Rourkela, you will see that just adjacent to NIT, NIT is Rourkela is a very beautiful campus. Adjacent to our NIT campus, Alok is staying just side by him. So just side by the NIT, we have a big hill, and it is a reserve forest, and you'll enjoy the very nice place. And Alok is staying just side by that hill only. So if you look into that, you'll find that the land belongs to the state government. But beneath the land, whatever the resources there, coal, other manganese, iron, all these things belong to the center. Forest issue also belongs to the center. Very unique thing. जमीन स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का है, उसके ऊपर जो है वो केंद्र सरकार का है, एंड उसके नीचे जो भी है वो भी केंद्र सरकार का. The very interesting about the Indian Constitution. So resource belongs to the center and land belongs to the state. And who are the ultimate victims? The ultimate victims, the people like us. See, and there is a also clause that the land belongs to the government. We always tell that private land, हमारा इतने एकड़ जमीन है, इतने हेक्टेयर जमीन है. See, whenever the government wants for any development purpose, if the government wants, today you see whenever we are taking the lands, so there is huge fighting, huge strike is going on, movement. I'll come to that because I worked on this movement, social movements and all. Recently, two of my PhD students got awarded. They worked on this social movement, and one in Jharkhand and one in Odisha. They worked on this industrialization and resistance movements. And you see, everywhere movement is riding up. And my special interest now, I'm looking into why this resistance is continuing, how we can neutralize the resistance. And I am an expert in conflict management also, because I am a resource person in conflict management. I used to go to different institutes to teach on conflict management. And not the international conflict, rather the local conflict. The conflict within the state, conflict in the villages levels, specifically development aspect of conflict. And so what I'm exactly telling now was I'm focusing on the conflict between the man and animals, specifically the elephant and the human conflict. So what I'm telling, if you look into this arena, the very interesting aspect you'll find that uh, whenever the government wants, you always tell that this is I have this much acre of land, nobody can take it, and I'll never allow to the government. But you see, the government has kept in all the law there is a clause that for nation's interest, the government can take away the land from you by paying the compensation. Even if it is your personal land having patta and all this thing, but the government can take the land if the government wants for any development projects. Any if the government wants, but generally what happens? Government as a welfare state, and government is always having a political will, because generally what happens, suppose you see now if you look at this farmers movement is continuing in near to Punjab and this Delhi, they have blocked the road and all. See, there is strike is continuing, and if you see that only few states are engaged in this conflict, few states are only, the farmers belongs to few states are also only joined in the strike, the others are having no much problems. But you see why the government is not able to take any hard step, because if the government wants, government immediately can vacate the peoples. So it is that the government will never do, because it will go for a massive carnage, and also the problem will continue. It will be very difficult to control, because every government also wants their political survival. So the government also never wants to create any kind of, because if the government take any hard step and wants to remove them from the site, then government can use its police force and do. But within, if they will use police force, some mishappening will happen, which may trigger the situation and make it as an all India issue. So also the image of the nation will be also ruined. So many things happen, because India is a democratic country. We always try to resolve these issues in a democratic way. So what exactly I'm telling? So means what is the major issues now? So we also know that the land is belongs to the government. Land is not belongs to any individual. We are only user. We are using the lands, and we have a user rights. Again, I'll define the user rights in the later on. What is that user right? There is one is ownership right, another is user right. No doubt, I have a ownership right of this land. I have a patta. I am owner. I am a user, and I am a owner. Fine. You can sell it. You can donate it, because you are the owner. And also at the same time, whenever the government wants this land, government can take this land from you either in a convincing way, or by force, or by coordination, whatever. Either government will convince you that I need this land, you leave this land, I want for the development project. Otherwise the government can, by force the government can take. Otherwise, if the government convinces that okay, these two people are not people are very much reluctant to leave their lands, okay, better to stop this project. Why should we get into this unnecessary conflict? But you see, if the government wants, government can take your land. So I'll discuss the land issues in details whenever we discuss about the Displacement, Land Acquisition Act and all that time we'll discuss in details. So what I'm telling here, you see, the very important thing is that there are some peoples who are using this land for centuries, but they don't have patta. They don't have a right over the land. They are only having the user rights. They only use the land. They don't have any right over the ownership rights. So like that, you see, when you people are presenting that already you might have studied the Tribal Forest Right Act and the rule, because exactly the tribals was having since generations, they are having the demand that they are keeping using the land for centuries, but they don't have any right over the ownership right over the land. They are only having user right. Only 2006 Tribal Forest Right Act came with an intention to provide such right to them, but still it is a question mark whether it has given justice to the tribal people or not. That will be debated in the future course of action. So what about the presentation? When you people are going to give presentation? Chaitanya?
Sir, next week.
Okay, so next week you people will present.
Yes.
So each class one group can present also. So you people decide and just write me in the WhatsApp that which group will present on which day. My intention is that the entire group should be involved. Suppose if you have a 5-6 members, we have a 4 group, na? And all these group members should be involved. So if somebody is presenting introduction, somebody should present one aspect, others should another aspect, somebody should present the conclusion. Through that, everybody should be involved in the presentation. It is not that only one person will present. Rather, let everybody to be present and everybody to be involved in the presentation process. And my sincere request to all of you, please involve in asking the questions. Don't make a match that my friends are presenting, we will be silent. And because see, we all has to learn something, and unless and until we ask question and learn, it will be not easy in our part to learn something. We have to be smart enough in that sense, and some of you I'm telling develop your English and all, because that will help you in the future. So anyhow, so what I'm telling here, you see, from that I understood now the tribal person who told me why you are picking up the mangoes. Today I understood that the land is, no doubt the land is belongs to the government, but that person is using that patch of land since generation, for which he claimed that this land is belongs to mine. Getting my point? So that is the conception which he developed. This land is belongs to my family and mine, so nobody has the rights over to climb the tree and take the mangoes. And another is I'll come to, and then we'll discuss about what I asked you, that whether the forest or the now you are clear. Forest is belongs to whom? Forest is belongs to forest department. We have two types of land. Anybody, can anybody tell me what are those two types of land? From administrative point of view, we have two lands. Anybody? Hello. This is a very common question. You are doing development studies, you should know. Very common question these are.
Sir, agriculture and non-agricultural land.
Okay, somebody else? Why only few people are speaking, others should speak?
So residential and commercial.
Okay, residential land and commercial land. Rishika, Sonurani, both are not speaking anything. Sarthak, all people are not speaking anything.
Yes, sir.
So many people are there. So because generally in my class I always ask the question that I am missing. Because I want the class should be more interactive. It is not that because morning class should be more energetic. Tell. See, land mostly whenever we speak about the land is generally two types. One is your forest land, another is revenue land. Getting my point? We have a revenue department, another is forest department. And for revenue department, we pay tax. For forest land, we never pay any tax. So that's why whenever government wants to develop any project, so government always try to grab the revenue lands, because revenue lands is mostly having the control of the government, because forest land is very rigid, and if he wants to encroach any forest land, it creates problem for the government, because government has to get a clearance from the from the again the forest department. And you see, suppose state government wants to use a land, I have already told you the land is belongs to state and the resources belongs to the center. So suppose the government wants to develop a kind of suppose state government wants to develop a project in a particular area, or the state government has invited an industry to set up in a particular area and for which some land is required. Then the government clarified and classified that this much hectares of revenue land is available and this much private lands is available, because the private land is also again revenue lands, but the government found that this much unused government land is government revenue land is there, that is unused means generally हम लोग हिंदी में बोलते गुचर जो जमीन है, so means this is called not the private property, rather the government property, public land, government land, but unused, but this is revenue land. And the second is the forest land. But the major problem the government faced regarding the forest land, because the government, if it is state government wants, the state government has to write to the forest department of the state, then the state's forest department has to write to the central forest department, and they have to get environmental clearance, the forest clearance and environmental clearance for starting a project. I'll come to that when I'll teach you CAMPA and all this thing. I'll make you very clear. Then if the central government wants, at the same time the central government has to take the approval from the state, because the land is belongs to the state. And why state government wrote to the center? Because it is a forest land. Forest is in our country, the forest is belongs to the center, but the forest land is belongs to the state. So that's why if the central government wants the land, central government has to take the permission from the state, because as a land. And if the state government wants, then the state government has to take the clearance from the forest department. Unless and until got the environmental clearance and forest department clearance, they cannot start any project. So in that sense, the forest is belongs to the kind of forest is again considered as a, sometimes it is not an open property resources, open access resource. Forest is mostly common property resources, where exclusively the you see there are the private resources on which you have a direct ownership right. The private whenever I'm telling the private resource, you have directly having the right, and whenever I'm telling common property resources which are accessible specifically to a particular group of people, and which managed collectively and managed by an and on which the individual has exclusively property right, are called CPR by common property resources. Here what exactly happened? Whenever I am telling about the common property, some group of people or some community are having exclusive right over that resources, which excludes the others from that. Suppose in the forest, generally the particular villages who are staying, they usually manage one patch of land as a CPR. So where the others cannot use it. Suppose if you look at the NIT Rourkela, try to understand. Is NIT Rourkela an open access resource or common property resource?
Common properties.
Because only identified people have the rights to use this, the available resources inside the campus, use this land, use the swimming pool, use the gym, use the library, all these things. So here, what is happening? When the moment we are identifying, we are also excluding others from the rights. Means the outsider who are not part of this NIT community, they are not entitled to access. So that means the moment we are giving a right to some group, we are excluding the rights of others also. Means it is not that everybody has an access, everybody has a right to use these resources. But you think about, whenever I am telling sea is in what domain? See, if I'll tell C, CJ, sometimes we tell it is an open access resource because everybody has a right, nobody is having control over that. But you see, then if it is that, then why we have a demarcation within the sea also? Getting my point? That this, from this onwards, this territory belongs to China, this territory belongs to Russia, this territory belongs to India. And mostly our conflict is happening, international conflict is also continuing in the South Indian Sea and all. So many conflict is going on, taking the sea into account. And you'll see, suppose you think about the river. I asked you river what kind of resource it is. Sometimes we always tell that river is a mostly we use to define the portion. Some portions is called an open access resources and some portion is called CPR. Because you see, and whenever you see the river, in a particular area of a river, you cannot go and fish there. You cannot go for a fishing purpose into a particular riverside, because this riverside is always given on lease to some group of people, whoever has taken the lease, whether it is an individual, whether it is a group. So he or that group or that community is having an exclusive right over the fishing in that area, and while the rest of the people are not having the right over the fishing in that area. So here that portion of the river is considered as CPR, by common property resources, or whatever the private resources or common property resources, as long as he has given the kind of legal right for the time being. But at the same time, there are some portion of the river which is all considered an open access resources. Anybody can go, anybody can fish, anybody can take the water. No, so always we have a demarcation for that, and based on that we define whether it is a CPR or it is an open access resources. The resources which is open to everybody, everybody can go and use it, that is called open access resources. So that's why always in open access resource हम लोग हमेशा क्या बोलते, there is a proverb, सरकार का माल दरिया में डाल. So means anything which is very open to everybody, the people. Suppose if you look at a grazing land in the village, a grazing land in the village, the cremation ground of the village, these are all open access, the resources. The people, sometimes we may claim it is in CPR, because if the community, if the villagers having exclusive right, they may not allow other villagers to have an access. But as long as it is not well defined about that village, then it is also open access. Any villagers can go and take their cows and bullocks and other domestic animals for grazing and all. So that's why we should be very much clear about what is open access resources, what is common property resources, what is private resources. Suppose if you have any land, you have a legal right over that land, that is called your private resources. Means you have a private ownership over that land. So these are the very much terminology generally used in the specifically in the context of resource. One is common property resources, another is open access resources, another is private resources. So now further in the next class we'll discuss about how we have to manage these resources. Now you are clear what is common property resources, what is open access resources, what is private resources. Suppose you have a land in your name, so this is your private resources, this is your private property, I have nothing to do with that. So means see, you have a home. It is not that the villagers or your colony people will go and sleep at your home, because this is exclusively individual rights. It is exclusive. The right is belongs to your family only. It is not that the right is belongs to everybody of your community or your colony members. Clear now? Any doubt over this?
Clear, sir.
Thank you.
And
Yes, sir, clear.
anybody else?
Sir?
Anything? Huh.
So then forest is open access resources.
See, that's
Everyone.
no, forest is not open access resources, because you see there are again a demarcation. I'll come to that when I'll teach the forest. There are huge classification in the forest. You see, there are classified, non-classified forest. So if a forest is belongs to reserve forest, nobody is having a right except the forest department. So if it is a sanctuary, if it is a, see, there is a reserve. Suppose we are declaring it as suppose a tiger reserve. Go to Similipal, it is a tiger reserve. So in tiger reserve, you don't have any right to get into this tiger reserve. So the government, if once they promote the tourism, you have to buy a ticket, you have to take in permission to get into. This is, you don't have any right to get into this tiger reserve. So if it is a reserve forest, also you have to take the permission to use it. It is not belongs to that. Again, there is lots of, because some forests are non-classified forest, so which is having open access. Again, within that open access, mostly the forests, either it is a this resources belongs to the forest department, or it belongs to the very exclusively the common property resources, where the rights of a particular designated community is defined. It is not mostly open access resource. Very rare land, forest land, you will get an open access resource.
Okay, sir.
Oh. So then tomorrow we'll meet at 9 o'clock. Right? So tomorrow 10 o'clock you have class?
Yes, sir.
Whose class? 10 o'clock?
Yes.
Narayan?
Development of
Narayan,
ecology.
sir.
Okay. ठीक. We'll meet at 9 o'clock.
Okay, sir.